You know, Joe talks about with the training element and keeping them engaged, it really drills down to this idea of turnover.
Yeah.
Right? Trying to get them so they don't leave. Biggest cost in any organization, losing a good employee. How many times have you lost somebody with experience, with knowledge, somebody who's talented, high potential person? You lose that person, it's like a shot to the stomach, right? It's difficult to recover from that. When we bring on new hires, we bring on millennials, when we invest in, even the interview process is an investment. It takes time, it costs money, it takes resources. You bring somebody into your store, you start to train them, they're there for a day, a week, a month, a year. You lose them, that turnover, that costs you money. That costs you time, relationships, all of the above. What I want to talk about for a few minutes is the idea of motivation, because Joe's talked about finding them, hiring them, bringing them in, training them. I want to motivate them to stay. Because motivation is all about beating the turnover game. It's all about winning that, retaining your people. Now, Joe alluded to it earlier, it's not just money. There's an entrance fee to get into the game, a certain level, and that changes for everybody on how much they have to make. But once they hit that number, it's beyond that. When we ask them three things about motivation, the three words through the research, what they're looking for, the first word was fairness. Fairness. They want to be paid a fair and equitable wage. Nothing about the highest paid, the most money, but a fair and equitable wage, the first thing. And then fullness of the job, beyond money. The fullness and what they're getting out of their position, the engagement, which we talked about trust and friendship and teamwork, the fullness. And then the final thing, and this is the most interesting, I think, is being viewed as being dependable. Because being in this team environment, they want to be viewed as somebody that can be relied on. Now, we can leverage that. We can start to leverage these things when we think about how to motivate it. But before we do that, I want to take a step back. This is by far my favorite, most interesting topic to talk about with millennials and just in general, because at the University of Alabama, I teach the sales management course. I see several hundred students every year, and one of their assignments is when they get their job offer letter, they have to come see me. And they have to share it with me and explain it to me. And I'll share some of those stories with you in a minute, but it's unbelievable. When you hear the mentality and you hear the thought process of what's being shared, it has changed my perspective on compensation and hiring and motivation dramatically. When we think about the millennial generation, let's think about it in a different manner. Anybody in here play video games? Maybe have some friends that play video games, know a little bit about them, a couple people. Well, if you're like me and you grew up in the 70s and 80s, we had Pong, we had Atari 2600, right? You would literally sit down, you'd plug the game in, you'd play until your thumbs hurt, until you broke the joystick. You'd play that game. Space Invaders, you would play that level over and over and over and over and over, and it would just get a little bit faster, and the aliens would get a little bit closer, and that would be the extent of it. And we'd play these games until we just got tired of it. What we would do, we'd sit there for hours. My brother and I would sit for hours and play these games. Today's games are different, aren't they? They're incredibly different. When you start to look at these games and you start to think about how they're built and how they're set up, nobody's sitting down. Now, they might play a game for 40 hours or 80 hours to win the game. Absolutely, it happens all the time. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. But they're not playing and sitting there for 4 hours just to play that one little thing. They play it a different way. They play it for a goal, for an achievement, for a save point. And then as soon as they hit that, it doesn't take that long. 15 minutes, 30 minutes maybe to hit that point. And then all of a sudden, guess what? They made an accomplishment. They made a tiny step. And then all of a sudden, if you played any games, you're like, you know what? I'll just play to the next point. The next achievement, the next goal, the next save point. And then all of a sudden, 30 minutes goes. And then all of a sudden, it's Saturday morning, and you say, holy cow, I started playing on Tuesday. But it's incremental. It's step by step by step. Now, you think about this video game analogy, and you think about compensation and motivation. This is exactly what you have to adopt in your organization. It has to be this video game mentality of incremental steps. When we think about motivation, there's three things. We have compensation, we have culture, and we have climate. We're going to focus on the hairy gorilla in the room, the 800-pound gorilla, and that's that compensation element. Guess what? You don't have to pay him more. You throw that away. I'm not going to sit here and tell you to pay anybody any more money, because that's not the answer. And candidly, if you do that, you're not going to get any extra credit with these people. You're not going to build social credit, social capital. But you do have to do things differently. When you think about this generation, their perspectives are different. Short term is the only thing that exists. The long-term perspective is gone. That's that video game that I played in 1979, Pong. That's gone. It's now about these short incremental steps. What's my next achievement? What's the next thing I can hit? If you tell me that I'm going to come to work with your retail store and I have a chance at an annual bonus a year, I don't think that way. What can I do today? What can I do next week? What can I do this month, this quarter? It has to be smaller. It has to be incremental. If you're doing a yearly contest, you're doing a yearly bonus, a yearly award, a yearly commission, whatever it is, no, that's not it. That's not going to get it. Break it up into smaller pieces that can be achieved so we see what we achieve and when the next one comes along. That's how we have to take a different look at this idea of compensation. Smaller units. Now here's the challenge. I said there's a paradox. The challenge is when we give these type of incentives that variable, so this variable rate pay, the challenge is that when we talk to millennials about that, they don't hear the variable part. So when we say there's a chance that you could make this much money, there's a chance you could earn 3% commission on a sale, or whatever the numbers may be, they don't hear the chance part, they hear the I will part. I told you earlier all the students come see me, and every student that comes see me, about 90%, they'll say to me, hey Professor Rapp, I got a job offer, let me show it to you. And I say, perfect. I say, my first question is, what are you going to make the first year? My very first question. And inevitably they say $100,000, $120,000, $180,000. I'm like, really? Because I'm about to quit my job and go to work for that company. Because that's pretty awesome. No, that's what they told me. I said, no, they didn't. Yes, they did. No, they didn't. Yes, they did. I'm like, no, they didn't. So I start getting angry. No, they didn't. And they're like, well, Professor Rapp, I just don't think you know how commissions work. And I laughed. So I have some idea. Some idea how they work. And I say, explain it to them. Well, they told me that if I do this and I do this, and I sell this much and I do this, I could make up to this. I'm like, ooh, see that word right there? The could part. That's the part you missed. What's your base salary? Well, my base salary is $30,000, $35,000, $48,000, whatever it may be. I said, okay, that's what you're guaranteed. The rest you have to work for. And I'm serious. It's like a little light goes on. Even though we talk about it in class, and we talk about it all semester long, all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay. It's this constant reinforcement of explaining this idea of transparency, letting them know, helping them understand, because they have selective listening. So from a compensation standpoint, a couple things you have to remember, think about the better video game mentality. Look at shorter, smaller incremental units on these pay and performance, so that rewards happening more frequently. It doesn't have to be more, just more often. The second thing we think about when we do these offers and we start talking about money, we have to be transparent between what's guaranteed and what they have to work for and what they have to do to earn those rewards. That's incredibly important. And the last thing about compensation I'll mention is that this group of millennials, the fear of loss is greater than the gain from a reward. The fear of loss is greater than the gain from a reward. If you know anything, back in the 70s, there was a guy named Kahneman, and he came up with this idea of prospect theory. He won a Nobel Prize for it, and it talks about risk and reward. And it says that some people out there are so risk averse that they won't even try to get a reward because they're afraid they might lose it. They don't even have it yet, but they're afraid they're going to lose it. The millennial generation, one of the challenges is that when we say that these things, when we say there's a commission available, when we say that there's a contest in our store that you could win, the challenge is when they don't win that commission, they don't win that contest, it can actually do more damage to that individual than actually winning the award would have done for them. So all of a sudden when they hear these things, they think they're going to get them, and the fact that they don't get it becomes problematic. So what am I saying? People are saying, okay, so you're telling me to get rid of all my sales contests, pull those out. No, I'm not saying that. Change them. One thing, the most important thing for millennials is the teamwork. Being dependable, being reliable, working in a team. Start making team incentives. If you want to run a contest, do it in a team format. Get the store involved. Get multiple people involved. All of a sudden, that social pressure has a bigger impact and a bigger influence than commission or anything else. It's a different way of thinking, because I don't want to be the guy as a millennial that lets my team down. I don't want to be the reason that we don't get this incentive because I didn't do my part. That social pressure is more motivating than anything else for this millennial group. So it's a compensation element, just a different way to look at it. We start to look at these other issues. We think about the idea of culture and building this organizational culture. There's a couple things we have to have, which I've mentioned. The first thing is the goal. What are we trying to do? The second thing is the why. Why am I trying to do this? What's in it for me? And then the third thing is, tell me how to do it. Build me the map. Build me the plan so I can achieve this goal. And then the fourth thing is an assessment. Give me some feedback along the way. We have to have those things. If we're only saying, go do this, and the other parts don't exist, that won't get done and we'll face turnover. They'll simply leave the organization. They'll go find some other firm to work for. They'll find another retail shop. Everybody says millennials are job hoppers, and it's true. Millennials are job hoppers. We face higher turnover rates today than we ever have in the past. But it's not because they're not loyal. It's not because they're just jumping ship. It's simply because the needs that they have are different than our needs, and we haven't adapted to them. Firms that have done this, and let me be clear, a lot of firms have started to change their behaviors and their motivational systems. They don't face turnover. They don't look at 30 or to 50% of the turnover. Their turnover is a lot less. We're doing a human resources strategy for a firm right now that's facing almost zero turnover because they have adopted different principles. They've moved to more of a weekly type incentive program with updates and feedback. And it's a little bit of a pain in the butt, to be clear, but when you have 0% turnover, that's an amazing thing. And then the last thing that we need to talk about is the climate. If your culture is your location, your climate is your weather. Your culture doesn't change. It needs to be present every day, unwavering. The climate is the thing that changes every day. It's what reinforces it. It's new information. It's coming all the time at you. We need to build a climate that supports the culture. Simple things, slogans, ceremonies, rewarding success. Right? Creating this team element where individuals are rewarded and that information is shared. Sharing the vision, the strategy. What's interesting is millennials, they have no power distance, so they'll talk to CEOs. They have a strong voice. Sharing the vision and the strategy of the firm, of the retail shop, incredibly valuable. That actually has impact. If you would have done that with me back in the day, I could care less. How do I maximize my compensation was a question. For this group, it's very, very different. There's a master at this, and this, before I turn it over to Joe, I want to share one example. There's a master out there. In my opinion, there's one person who's better than anybody else I've ever seen at managing these millennials. From recruiting to hiring to motivating, the whole nine. We're fortunate at the University of Alabama, we have a chance to, we work with recruiting. And whether you like Alabama football or not, the coach there, Nick Saban, is truly incredible. He won a national championship at LSU. He's won at Alabama. He's done some great things. And whether you like him or not, the things he does recruiting-wise and motivating his players is amazing. And we work with him every spring and work with the football team. And we get a chance to spend time with these recruits that come in, walk them around campus, talk about academics. And and help out this recruiting process. And it's neat. It's really neat how it works. And we got started in this 3 or 4 years ago. And my first time I did it, I went in and I said, okay, I'm good at sales. I'm good at talking to people, no problem. Well, talking to a 17-year-old kid who's a 5-star recruit is really different than talking to other people, right? Because it's just, the conversations are challenging. You're talking to mom and dad and everybody else, and brothers and sisters and grandma and grandpa. We're talking to this individual and walk around, and after the recruiting's done, we take them into the lunchroom. And you sit down at the lunchroom with them, you grab your lunch, and then the coaches will come in. And depending on the caliber of your recruit, depends on the coach that sits at your table. So I'm sitting there, and I'm having a conversation with the recruit and his family, and then all of a sudden, there's just a silence that falls in the lunchroom. And Coach Saban walks in, he's got a gentleman with him, ginormous guy, great big guy comes in, and I hear people start whispering, that's Julio, that's Julio. Of course, I just got to Alabama, I'm like, who's Julio? Right? I have no idea who Julio is. Well, it's Julio Jones, who had just lost. He'd been drafted by the Atlanta Falcons, played in the playoffs the week before, lost. So he came in town to help out in recruiting. So he and Nick Saban walk in, and then they sit at my table. Now, this is my first interaction with recruiting, so I have to act like I've been here before. Right? I can't ask for his autograph, I can't do anything. So I get the head nod, and that's the sign for me to get up and leave, and I left. And then I watch Coach Saban at work. And here's a millennial, here's somebody who's 17 years old, who has all the qualities that we talked about, being recruited across the country. And he sits down and he starts to talk to him, and he starts sharing information about vision and strategy. And he starts to tell them about the goals and what they're going to do. And when he starts to paint this picture, and you hear him doing this, you see this individual. When he's talking to them, he's talking about the family of Alabama football. And he talks about this individual's personal goals. And when he sits there and he said to him, he said, listen, he's like, your life is going to be this long. Your football career is going to be about that long. Even if you go in the NFL. He's like, the rest of your life is going to be based off your education. He's like, I need to help you focus on your education more than anything. And then football and our goals will come second to that. And he connected these personal goals, the things he needs to do, with the organization's, the football's goals. And to watch this was amazing. And I could see how he gets these recruits. Well, needless to say, the individual's name was T.J. Yeldon. He signed with Alabama football. And for his first game in Jerry Jones Stadium in Dallas, he rushed for, I think, 140 yards over Michigan, which was truly outstanding. But to see somebody at work, to see somebody do this, and I'm sure for Coach Saban, who's a hard-headed person, to change style and adapt to this new generation had to be challenging. But the success he's gotten from that is just, it's immeasurable.